All right. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to our third class of This Can, that doesn't look right, This Can Happen. That's right. That's right. This can happen. That's really what all this course is about. It's not that this can never happen, but this can happen. And it's really just a single word that you just take out and everything, and the meaning of everything changes. And the same thing, by the way, applies in what we're going to study today. Is a subtle difference can change our entire perspective. So let's first also set out that today's class is sponsored by Sign and Net Hater. So thank you so much for sponsoring today's class, and may God bless you and your family with many, many wonderful and special blessings. You don't remember? Okay. Thank you so much, and may God bless you and your family with many, many wonderful blessings. Okay. So today's class is called Superhuman versus Superhumans. I honestly have no idea what that means. But like I said in what I called the class, they make, for the PowerPoints, they make the names of the classes. I would like to call it, as I told you in the email, the meaning behind the mitzvot and how far have we gone. In other words, what is it that our mitzvot are accomplishing and how far along the goal of what our mitzvot accomplish have we gotten? And that's the connection to the redemption. So to speak, how are the mitzvot bringing us closer to the redemption and how far along in that journey are we? So just to give you a little bit of background, from last week. I know last week was a little bit complicated, hopefully not too complicated, but last week we discussed the soul of redemption. In the first class, we discussed the body of redemption, so to speak, the physical goodies that are promised, world peace and prosperity and health and happiness and all those things. And we said that's an outgrowth of the real thing of the Moshiach, the real Messiah, the soul of the Messiah, the spiritual happening of the Messiah, the inner dimension of the Messiah. And we said, what is the inner dimension of the Messiah? In order to understand that, we had to delve deeply into what is the reason why God created the world. And we said, God created the world because God desired a home in this lowly world. And I'll say that one more time. God desired a home in this lowly world. So what does that mean? First, we explained what is lowly world. What makes a lowly world versus a higher world? What makes a lower world and a higher world? We said, God is everywhere. A lower world and a higher world is really just our awareness of God. The lowest world in which we are has less awareness of God, but it doesn't take away from the reality that God is there. And God desired that in a world such as ours, where there's a lack of awareness of God, we should bring in the awareness of God, thus making it a home for God. So we've taken a world that had a lack of awareness for God and made it a home for God. But how do we actually do this? How do we actually make this place a home for God? What is the way in which we make this world a home for God? And last week we said through Torah and Mitzvot, but we did not explain how. And so that's what we're going to have to do this week. Explain how is it that through our Mitzvot we bring the awareness of God into this world. And now off the bat, you could probably give me an answer, but as usual, we like to understand something in depth, and that's what we're going to do. But first, we need to start with the joke, of course. So the joke goes like this. There are two city workers for the city of two county workers, two Pinellas County Public Works, and I see them on the side of the road. They're digging over there. They're digging. What's going on? There's one guy who's digging a hole in the ground, and there's another guy right behind him filling the holes. They keep going on the side of the road. One guy's digging, the next guy's filling. And I'm watching this all day. Finally, I go over to them and say, "What are you doing over here for the city?" They said, "Well, my job is to dig the holes. His job is to fill them. The guy who plants the trees couldn't show up today, so we're just doing our work." And that's the thing. So, we could do actions, but we want to know the meaning behind it. We don't want to be city workers who are just working and we don't know what the work is about. We want to know that we're working. Good evening. We want to know that we're working and we're accomplishing something. What is it that we're accomplishing? So let's start with mitzvot. Why do you do a mitzvah? So this is going to be a personal question because that's really the root. Again, we said mitzvot bring Moshiach, but I want to know, why do you personally in your life do a mitzvah? And that will help. I'm going to throw up on the screen a couple ideas, but I want to get into the class why we do mitzvot. It's going to be rather interesting. It's page 97. If you have the student book, you can see it over there. But why do you do a mitzvah? Please put in the comments, or you can tell me why is it that you in your life you do mitzvot? Pick a mitzvah, pick any mitzvah. Pick a mitzvah that you do. Pick a mitzvah in your mind that you do. Don't tell me what the mitzvah is, and then tell me why is it that you do that mitzvah? What's the reason? Please put in the chat if you can, or you can just tell me, whichever way. So let's say Shabbat, candles, Passover, whatever it is. Why is it that you do a mitzvah? We have a couple options here. Because God said so, or it makes my life more orderly and stable. It makes my life more spiritual. It strengthens my Jewish identity. It feels right. It makes the world a better place. I believe that God will reward me for doing a mitzvah. Or conversely, because I'm afraid God will punish me. I'm afraid to disobey God. And there's another one that's not there. I would add because I grew up with it. So there's all different options. Just curious if you want to throw in the chat. Somebody here says, we got a couple of responses, so good. Let's see, to develop and nurture a relationship with God. I want to bring Hashem into everything that I do. Okay. Making me feel good knowing I've done some good. Plus, I've been on the receiving end, so I'd like to reciprocate. I'm going to assume that you're referring specifically to a mitzvah over there that's helping others. Not all mitzvahs are necessarily like that. Somebody else says, I enjoy doing the mitzvahs that I do. I think it makes the world a better place. Okay. To make myself a better person. I love all these responses. And as we're going to see in the class, there is really no wrong response. And we'll explain why and how there could be all these different meanings to mitzvahs and why it's so important. Let's take a look at here. Another one, it feels good to help. So really, really like all the responses going on here. And again, so we see here, and I'm sure like all these ideas are you've seen before, right? In Jewish sources, or you've thought of it when you do a certain mitzvah. So what is the real reason we do mitzvahs? Now, to be sure, obviously, someone who's never really studied Jewish theology, Jewish religion, like all of you here have, some people believe, yes, Estelle? You want to say something? No, okay. Some people believe that we do mitzvahs just because God said so. God said so, and there's the thou shalt and thou shalt nots. And if you do the do's, you get rewarded. If you do the don'ts, you get punished, and you head down to the eternal barbecue. So a lot of people think of religion. Obviously, you all know a little better than that, but there is obviously a place where it speaks about reward and punishment. For example, if you follow my statutes, keep my commandments, and observe them, I'll provide you rain in the proper time. The earth will give its produce, and the trees of the field will yield their fruits. So here you see, obviously, God does reward and punish. And as we've discussed in other classes, God does reward and punish, and just from a simple level, that's because God is fair. If he gives a list of do's and do nots, he'll give incentives to do it, and he'll give punishments if you don't do it. Or as we've discussed in other classes, not a punishment, it's a cleansing process. But regardless, that doesn't mean that that's the main purpose of why he's doing it. It's like I say, if you're trying to get your kid to eat breakfast and you have rewards and punishments for listening to you, that doesn't mean the reason you're trying to get them to eat breakfast is because of the reward, right? And so similarly, we want to delve deeper into the mitzvah. There is much more to mitzvahs than just reward and punishment. So what is that deeper meaning of a mitzvah? So let's take a look at here. The Alter Rabbi Shneir Zalman V'Yadi writes like this: this ultimate perfection of the age of Moshiach and the resurrection, namely the revelation of the infinite radiance of God in this physical world, depends on our actions and our work throughout the duration of the exile. So again, what he's saying is, when the Messiah comes, we're going to have the ultimate age. As we read in some of the previous classes, the knowledge of God is going to fill the world. There's going to be an awareness of God everywhere. Okay, how does that happen? It depends on our actions and our work throughout the duration of exile. And then he continues, for the reward of a mitzvah is the result of the mitzvah itself. Again, the reward of the mitzvah is the result of the mitzvah itself. In other words, I'll explain in a moment, actually. This is because with the performance of a mitzvah, one elicits God's infinite radiance so that it descends into and is integrated within the physical matter of this world. So we're going to unpack that. What this paragraph said, three things that we knew already, or I should say two things that we know already, and the third thing that we're going to explain. One thing it said is that the times of the Mashiach is the ultimate age, right? The ultimate perfection is the age of Mashiach. That we've already discussed in previous classes. We've discussed that what does that Mashiach look like? It's a revelation of God. That's the soul of the Mashiach, the real spiritual meaning of Mashiach, not just world peace. revelation of God. And we mentioned last week that this is accomplished through the mitzvahs. Okay? But how is it accomplished through the mitzvah? And so he gives a clue to us. How do we accomplish making a revelation of God through the mitzvah? Through the mitzvah itself. In other words, the mitzvah itself brings the times of the Moshiach. To better understand the difference between a result and a reward. Again, we're saying the reward of a mitzvah is the result of the mitzvah itself. What does he mean? He means if you go to work and you get money, there is no inherent connection between the money and the work that you did, right? That's called a reward. Okay, that's a typical reward. You're rewarded for your work. But a result would be, a reward result would be if you are building a home for yourself. So you're spending time, you're putting the bricks, you're laying the bricks, the hard work, laying the bricks. And when you're done, you have a home. There, the reward is a result of your actions. It is intrinsically connected to what you did. And so the doing of a mitzvah is not just a good deed for which God rewards us with the Moshiach or with the Garden of Eden, but the mitzvah itself creates the era of Mashiach. That's what he said. The mitzvah itself creates the aura of Mashiach. It's not a reward for what we did. In other words, some people think, oh, the Mashiach is, we hold ourselves back enough times. We refrain from eating pork. We do things against our will long enough, and we do things that God wants long enough. Eventually, God is going to say, all right, you did good for long enough. I'm going to give you an era of utopia. What we're saying here, no, the era of utopia is an outgrowth of what we did. And as he says, this is because with the performance of a mitzvah, one elicits God's infinite radiance that it descends into and is integrated within the physical matter of this world. So what it's saying is that, and we're going to unpack that second part too. So I unpacked the first part. The reward of a mitzvah is the result. I explained result versus reward. So again, you do a mitzvah, the mitzvah itself creates what we're going to have when Mashiach comes. What do we have when Mashiach comes? An awareness and revelation of God. So it makes sense that every mitzvah brings awareness and revelation of God in this world. But how so? How does it actually work? So again, so far I've dictated to you, so to speak, what a mitzvah does. A mitzvah creates awareness and revelation of God within this world. But how does it actually work? Now, I know we had a discussion in previous classes, in our previous Mashiach course. We went on a lengthy explanation, and it's a true point. We discussed how the idea of the world is hiding, how there's a klipa, which hides over the energy and life force of every object in the world. When we do a mitzvah, we're revealing that the true life force of the object is godliness. This class, we're going to go a little bit not so mystical, and it's going to really fit, and we're going to understand it in a very human terms. So let me let's do this. This is a really interesting analogy. Let me do a recap because I don't like people getting lost. Let me do a recap so you know where we are. The recap goes like this. So far, what we've said is mitzvos are what bring the Mashiach, and it's not a reward like money. It is a result, like building. Okay. And so home for God is a place where God is fully revealed. Here's a depiction of your home. In your home, you can act silly. You can act however you want. You can be fully yourselves. And so similarly, God's home means God is fully revealed. And we do it through the mitzvahs. All right, here's the slide. So anybody knows what this is over here? Yeah? Any takers? Nobody knows what it is? It's not a trick question, by the way.
Piano?
A piano, yes, very good. It's not a trick question. That is a piano. All right. Now, let's imagine that this is a grand piano. That's very, very nice. Now, let's imagine this really beautiful piano is in 3 parallel universes. So we have one universe, which is like ours, where we have music, okay? So we know this is a piano that plays beautiful tones. Then let's say you have this piano exists in another world where nobody knows about music. Music doesn't exist. It's a world just like ours, but with no music. So what happens to that piano? It becomes the same thing that happens to my treadmill. It becomes a place where you put things. As you can see, it's become a table, right? And then let's imagine a third world in which it's only inhabited by woodpeckers. I think you see where I'm going with that one, okay? a big wooden piano, a world inhabited by woodpeckers. Okay. Now, this piano that's in either our world, a world or a world number 2, which is just like ours. Let's see. I hope, or world number 2, which is just like ours, but there's no music. And world number 3, where there's woodpeckers. Is there a difference in this object? Is this object any different in the 3 worlds? No, it's the same exact, and it has the same. In theory, it should have the same meaning. It's an object that can play piano. However, you place this object, you place the piano in our world. One person will walk by and say, "Wow, that's a nice piano." Another musician will walk by and say, "Hey, let me play this." He starts playing and everybody gathers around him and listens to the beautiful music. If you've ever been to some airports, they have random pianos in places. People sit down and play them, and it's very nice and beautiful. Hopefully that'll come back with COVID. All right, so that's world number 1. And world number 2, people come to this piano and they look at it. And again, they have no concept of music. And so they look at it. Maybe somebody even presses a key. They go, what's that? And so they say, oh, this is a really, wow, exquisite table with such nice taste. Let's eat dinner on this or something. I don't know. So in this world number 2, people have a recognition that it's an exquisite piece. They may even recognize that it's some mechanical object, but they aren't getting what it really is. Again, so they get that it's something special, but they don't get what it really is. And then in the 3rd world, inhabited by woodpeckers, the woodpeckers just see it as another piece of wood, and they're going to peck it to death. Okay, that's what woodpeckers do. They see wood, they're going to peck it to death. And so in the 3rd world, this object is literally reduced to its most base level. And so our world is like that piano. Everything in this world, truthfully, is godly. But some people come to this world and we're like the woodpeckers. We look at everything at its most base level. What I might call, what people say, let's eat and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. We just take the world. What can I get out of this world? The world's going to explode in 1 billion years. Let's just have pleasure, enjoy, eat food, yada, yada, yada. Who cares? Destroy the world and we're done. Yeah. Eat and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. That's like the woodpecker. Looking at this whole beautiful world like the woodpecker. Then we have the more sophisticated people who know that there's something special about this world. There's some purpose and meaning. There's some beauty to this piano. They don't know it's piano. And so similarly, we have a lot of people in this world who are seeking meaning and purpose, but they're kind of poking in the dark. And so you have all these people seeking meaning and purpose, and so they find purpose in all different things. And some of them may be part of the truth, like let's say, save the whales, save the seas. Everybody's trying to find a purpose in life, help people. We're grabbing onto little ideas. Just as the piano, it's also a great place. I know my grandmother's house, the piano is full of pictures, people still playing it, but it's full, so people, they're groping in the dark. They know there's got to be some meaning to it, but they're just picking on different ideas of meaning. And then finally, we have the ultimate meaning, the playing, when we recognize it's a piano. In other words, when we recognize that this world is godly, and when we recognize that this world is really just here to express God's goodness. This world is here like the piano. Everything that's in this world is really here just to scream out God. That's really what everything is here for. And so when you think about it, the piano exists in all 3 worlds and it's the same. But a difference is going to be our awareness of that reality. So again, the reality is the same. What changes is our awareness of that reality. And that's just one of the things I like to get onto a lot of times. I point out again and again. Sometimes people say, what do I need a connection with God? Well, why is it so important? Putting reward and punishment aside, okay? Let's say God's not going to punish me, right? Why do I care? And the answer I always say is not so much because if you live life without God, it's devoid of meaning, but more than that, the reality of the world and why it's here is to express godliness. That is the reality of the world. And so if you're not living with that, then you're missing the point. You're missing the reality of the world. You're going to be like a woodpecker, pecking away at a piano. And so what we've learned now, this idea that we have is the reality of the world is actually an expression of godliness. It's just up to us if we are going to be aware of that, and we have to make others aware that everything that is here is to reveal godliness within the world. And by doing godly acts with physical objects It's like taking that piano and playing it. When we do godly acts with these physical objects in the world, with a godly purpose in mind. So let's say, and this is what I was saying before. Some people are trying to find purpose, and they do random things which may be part of the purpose, but it's not the whole thing. So some people will help people. Some people save the deceased. Some people save the animals. But if I do all of those things, and more, spiritual stuff too, with God in mind, then that is really the purpose of what it's all there. Then I'm really getting to the depth of it. If I'm going to help someone, because that's an expression of God's goodness within the world, so to speak, now I'm really getting to the purpose of what everything is here for. So again, the piano is always there. The stage is set, so to speak. The meaning is there. It's just a question of how much are we going to bring that awareness. And so let's read over here. Rabbi Leah explains. Through the performance of a mitzvah, a person causes a flood of God's infinite light to descend from above and being clothed within the corporality of the world, within an object that was previously under the dominion of and whose existence depended upon the spiritual forces that obscure godly reality. What that means is the world naturally obscures the truth. The world obscures the truth. Naturally, we look at the wood as like a woodpecker. More sophisticated people eventually understand it's a table, and then hopefully we reach it as piano. This includes all things that are kosher and permissible with which a mitzvah is performed. For example, the parchment used in tefillin, a mezuzah, or a Torah scroll, and etrog, so long as it is not orla, okay? Money given to charity, so long as it has not been dishonestly acquired. And similarly with other material things, when one uses these objects to perform God's mitzvahs and thereby fulfills his expressed desire, their vivifying source ascends and absorbs within God's infinite light. Let me explain that a little bit more at length, but the way we're looking at it today, purely from a very down-to-earth perspective, is basically the mitzvahs are tools with which we reveal that the reality of the world is godly. And when we reveal that the reality of the world was always godly, that's what it really was. We're just revealing it. We are making this world a home for God. And I'm going to pause there before I delve farther into this. How exactly is it that a mitzvah brings awareness of God within the world? There are actually two ways that it does it. But I'm going to pause over here. Any questions? No? So again, I'll just show you the thing on the screen. You can chat if you have a question. So again, the mitzvah is going to reveal what was there, but we didn't previously see. And now we're going to get into really a mitzvah accomplishes this in two different ways. This is really an interesting thing. So you're going to have to hold head. So I first want to make sure everybody has clear. Our job is to make this lowly world into a home for God. What does it mean to make a lowly home for this world to God? To bring the awareness of God into this world. Today, we took that a little further by saying, actually, the reality of the world was always a piano. The reality of the world was always that it's a place for God. The only problem we had was we were not aware of it. And so by doing a mitzvah, any mitzvah that we do, we can bring that awareness of God into this world, so to speak, making the recognition that that is actually a piano. It's not a piece of wood. It's not a table. And we accomplish this through the mitzvahs, and mitzvahs accomplish this in two ways. Are you ready? Because this part is a little bit complicated. Yes? Yeah? Okay. So if every mitzvah really brings an awareness of God into the world, why? Because the mitzvah shows how the reality of the world is godly, right? I'm doing this because God told me to. So then really there shouldn't be a difference between one thing or the other in this world. In other words, why is, let's say, eating matzah on Passover a mitzvah and not eating pork? I know this may sound crazy, but again, if the point is really just that we're listening to God, what is the difference between one mitzvah and the other? Or let me put another term. Some people like the more spiritual mitzvahs. They feel it brings them closer to God. It's more spiritual. Meditation, prayer, studying Torah. They feel those are the mitzvahs God likes more because they make me feel more spiritual. I feel closer to God. Other people are just the opposite. Other people feel when I do a mitzvah helping another person, that is really the mitzvah that God likes because I'm making the world a better place. But when we think about the point that I just said, if the whole idea of a mitzvah is really just listening to God, and because you're doing something because you're listening to God, it means that now you're aware that everything in this world is for God, then really there's no difference between one mitzvah and the other. No mitzvah is actually better than the other. There's no such thing as one mitzvah being better than the other. So let's take a look here at this first aspect of a mitzvah. There are two aspects to every mitzvah. One aspect is the fact that with every mitzvah that we do, we fulfill God's will. Okay? God told me, I'm doing what he said. Right? It's like when you tell your children to do something. Is there a difference between telling them to make their bed or telling them to respect their elders? In one sense, you might say there is a difference, but in another sense, you can say there's no difference. They're supposed to be listening to you. They're supposed to heed to what you say. They never got the note on that, but okay. So again, in this regard, there is no difference between one mitzvah and the next. Put it in this terms: honoring your parents is a commandment by God, right? We have to listen to our parents, right? So as far as that commandment is concerned, is there a difference what they ask you for? Is there a difference if they ask you for a cup of water, or is there a difference if they ask you for $100? No, maybe one is harder for you, but in fulfilling the mitzvah and fulfilling your parents' will, it's the same. So the same thing in fulfilling God's will. If I give charity or if I pray, they're both fulfilling what God wants of me. And so in that sense, in the sense of I'm following what God wants of me, there's no difference. And now I'm saying on top of that, and truthfully, then really God could have given us opposite mitzvahs. Instead of saying eat cows, you could have told us to eat pigs. There's no difference really between the cow or the pig if the whole idea is just listening to God. An individual fulfills a mitzvah not because of its unique qualities and its unique effects, but simply to carry out God's will. This aspect of the mitzvah is aptly demonstrated in the observation of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, that if we were commanded to chop wood, we would do it in obedience with the divine will with the same enthusiasm as we fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin. So again, there's an aspect of mitzvahs where it doesn't make a difference what the mitzvah is. And even if God said every Sunday you have to go and chop wood, that would be the mitzvah. That would be a mitzvah. And then there's a second aspect of mitzvahs. I don't want to confuse you with the second aspect yet. I want to first help you fully understand the first aspect of what we're saying over here. So let's explain. What does it mean? Why is it so important to fulfill God's will? Because our physical world, as we said earlier, is a world which has a lack of awareness of God, and it has a lack of awareness of God in a very extreme level. Okay, it's very, very extreme. What do I mean? This world has a perception of self-sufficiency and selfishness. The natural state of this world is we feel self-sufficient. We don't naturally feel that there is a God. We have to study to find that there's a God. Again, the world screams at it because you can look at the world and say, wait, how is everything here? But we naturally feel self-sufficient within this world. Not only does this physical world see itself as an existence other than God, but naturally perceives itself as independent of God. In the higher worlds, you cannot feel independent of God. It doesn't work. Remember, I gave the example last week. I said, there's the 4 stages. There's the fetus, there's the infant, there's the child, and there's the teenager or adult, right? Levels of awareness of dependency on their parents. When you become the adult or the teenager or whatever, you totally think, not only am I not dependent on my parents don't know anything anymore. I know better than them. Until they get a little bit older, then they think their parents know a little bit more. All right. And so the first function of a mitzvah is to penetrate this concealment. This world screams out and says, I am who I am. Or as Pharaoh said, I don't know about God. Who's this God? I'm a God. Who's this God you're talking to me about? And so that's what a mitzvah is. God wants to say, the world naturally says there is no God. I want you to do something just because I'm telling you to do it. That alone tells us that there is a boss to this world. There is someone who runs this world. And because he runs this world, I'm going to listen to him. And therefore, every object that I do a mitzvah with becomes an instrument of divine will. The divine will wanted me to do it. I am doing it. And that's an expression of the fact that the world is not self-sufficient. It is dependent upon God. And so the physical resources, I so to speak, recognize the physical resources that I own and the physical resources that I control aren't just there for me. They're for a divine commandment. And in this idea, every mitzvah is the same. And when you think about it, really there's no mitzvah that gets you closer to God. Okay. For example, this is in the back, by the way. And if you have the student book, there's a great lengthy article over there. Let's say somebody who can't hear, God forbid, walks into a room, and you tell them the music's too loud. Can you turn it down? They turn it down, they turn it up. It doesn't make a difference to them. It has no connection to them. Sound has no connection to them, unfortunately. The music higher, the music lower, doesn't make any difference to them. And so you kind of say that could be with us. Us to God, it's a totally different playing level. It's more spiritual, less spiritual, holier mitzvah, less holy mitzvah. To God, it really doesn't make a difference. We are insignificant, naturally insignificant. We are naturally insignificant to God. And so really any mitzvah we do makes no difference in God's life. The only reason it makes a difference is because he told us to do it and we're doing it. So fasting a Yom Kippur, or fasting on Tisha B'Av, or fasting on the fast of Esther, or wearing woolen strings or keeping kosher. In that sense, there's no difference between each mitzvah, because a more spiritual mitzvah, Yom Kippur, really doesn't get you closer to God. It's all about listening to God, whether it's a big ticket item or a small ticket item, whether it's Yom Kippur or whether it's honoring your parents, whether it's not mixing milk and meat or whether it's not mixing wool and linen, whether it's not eating pork or whether it's not eating bugs. In that sense, all the mitzvahs are equal. You just have to be listening to God, because what's important about listening to God, you are basically submitting yourself to God, saying that, God, you are the master of this world and I'm going to listen to you. That's the first level of awareness we bring into the world when we do a mitzvah. I want to tell you a story to bring this out. There was a story, you've probably heard this before. There were two tzaddikim, Rabbi Zusha and Rabbi Melech. Rabbi Zusha of Anapoli, Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk. So Rabbi Zusha and Rabbi Elimelech, or Rabbi Zusha and Melech, were great brothers tzaddikim. And they were one time in a city and they were framed for a robbery. They were thrown into the prison. Now, in those days, prisons was just one giant room of a bunch of people that were stuck in there. And as they're sitting there, one brother nudges his brother and says, look, Reb Melech, we've got to daven mincha. It's getting late. And he says, but we can't daven, because the way that those prisons worked is there was one big pot in the middle where everybody would defecate. And you're not allowed to pray in such a place. You can't pray in a place where there's, a bathroom. You can't pray in a bathroom. You can't pray in such a place. And so Rabbi Zusha started crying. It's coming mincha, the holy mincha, I want to daven. And then his brother nudged him and said, why are you crying? He says, what do you mean? We can't daven. We're going to miss davening mincha. And so Rabbi Melech looks at him and says, listen, who told you to daven mincha? He says, God. He says, and who told you when there's something in the room that you shouldn't be praying? He said, God. He said, what's the problem? So before you were going to listen to God by praying, now you're going to listen to God by not praying. And it's just, wow, you're right. And so they both get up and start dancing. They're so excited. We're fulfilling a mitzvah by not davening. And so they start dancing and dancing and dancing. And the story ends, actually, which is not the point of over here. They start dancing and dancing. Suddenly, two people are dancing in the prison. All the other people start dancing and they're all excited. And eventually the prison warden comes and he says, what's all this? Everybody's supposed to be sad. Why are they dancing? And so somebody tells him, look, the two Jews, they were pointing at the pot in the middle of the room, and then they started dancing. He says, that's it. No more joy in my prison. He pulls the pot out of the room, and then the two brothers were able to daven mincha. But the real point of the story is the fact that they recognized that even when we can't pray, if I'm not praying because it's for God, then what's the difference? Because of how I feel about it, doesn't make a difference. God, if he wants me to pray, I'll pray. He doesn't want me to pray, I don't pray. I'm excited to do what God wants. It's like when Corona first hit, and we weren't sure how to deal with it and how to pray safely. Obviously, what God wanted at that point is we don't pray in shul. Once we figured it out, whatever. But obviously, that's what God wanted. And so you can fulfill God's will in that way. Naturally, you feel like, what do you mean? No minion, no this, no that, right? But who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for yourself or for God? We're doing it for God. So it doesn't make a difference how I feel about it. It's for God. Similarly, it says if there's a medical health emergency on Shabbos, right? who should go run and pick up the phone? Who should run and call? Or the problem is a lot of the religious people don't have a phone on them. But who should let's say drive the car, bring the person to the hospital? Who should whatever? Should the person who's religious or the non-religious person in the synagogue do it? So the Code of Jewish Law says you should have the most important person in the synagogue to do it. Why? Because we have to show, just as it's a mitzvah, usually not to do anything on Shabbos, it's a mitzvah to save a life. This is now the mitzvah. We don't say, well, we might as well have someone who doesn't keep Shabbos anyways do it, right? No, this is a mitzvah right now. So we don't want to give off any such impression. And so we usually have the feeling that I do the mitzvah because it's spiritual. I do the mitzvah because it makes me feel good. But in reality, we do a mitzvah because that's what God wants. And that's what we have to focus on, at least in the first aspect. And we'll get the second one in a moment. But every mitzvah, in a sense, is equal. There's no difference between one mitzvah and the other. Every mitzvah expresses God's will, whether it's to pray or not to pray, whether it's to eat or not to eat, right? Naturally, I think we all appreciate eating on Shabbos than we do fasting Yom Kippur, right? Although today the intermittent fasting is in, so maybe not. But, we all have a natural feeling. But in reality, we listen to God, and whatever it is that he asks of us, big or small, there's no difference. It's all saying, I am going to listen to God. And in a sense, actually, when it's less comfortable for you, it's more expressing this idea that God is boss over the world. God is boss over my life. God is boss over everything in this world. And that is the first aspect of a mitzvah. So that's what we have with the first aspect of the mitzvah. And that's what I showed you before on the screen. The first aspect of a mitzvah is general fulfillment of God's will. General fulfillment of God's will. But then there is a second aspect of every mitzvah. So, there is something important about the details of a mitzvah. So let's take a look at the second aspect of every mitzvah. The second aspect of a mitzvah is that each mitzvah brings a spiritual refinement to the individual performing the mitzvah. I'll read that one more time. The second aspect of a mitzvah is that each mitzvah brings a spiritual refinement to the individual performing the mitzvah. Similarly, the mitzvah brings a spiritual refinement to the object with which it is performed and ultimately refines the world. The difference between these two elements, meaning the two reasons for doing a mitzvah, is that with the first aspect, the specifics of the mitzvah are irrelevant. All mitzvahs are equal, for they are all equally God's will. By contrast, the second element highlights the significance of each mitzvah's specific details. For each mitzvah brings a dissimilar branch of spiritual enhancement to the soul, and it refines the world in a different way. So what this is saying here is that, so the first step was, the world is a place that says it's self-sufficient. We do a mitzvah that shows that I'm reliant on God. Now we have a second aspect in which making a home for God is specifically by elevating the particulars of each object. So every part of this world has specific elements to it, and everything that we do, we invest a certain part of ourselves. So let's say in prayer, when you pray, you're moving your lips, you're holding a prayer book, and you have emotions. So when you do a mitzvah, in addition to fulfilling God's will, you're now elevating, so to speak, three parts. You are elevating your mouth, you're elevating your mind, you're elevating your heart, you're elevating the prayer book. If you're shopping for your mother, maybe it'll give you patience if she has a long list. If you are helping another person, it can give you feelings, it can refine you to become a more kind person. If you're observing Shabbos, it can instill with you the recognition that God is the creator of the world and gives you everything that you need in your life. The laws of family purity help refine our desires. The mitzvah of charity can cultivate our compassion. All mitzvahs that we do can refine us in different ways. And I really go back to the chat where people said earlier, some people said, makes the world a better place, feels good to help, make myself a better person. That is all within this aspect of the mitzvah. That is all within this aspect of the mitzvah. In other words, that there is an aspect of the mitzvah which also elevates you. So let's take a look at the text over here, which really describes this. And as he points out, pointing to both Does God truly mind if a person slaughters an animal from the throat or slaughters it from the back of the neck? In other words, if God is just trying to get you to listen to him, there's no difference which side you slaughter from, right? The laws of slaughtering. We know we have to eat kosher meat slaughtered on the neck. But really, if it's just for us to listen to God, there's no difference. So why did God say the neck? Rather, the mitzvot were given only to refine the individuals who perform them. In other words, in the second aspect of mitzvahs, it's only for us. The second aspect of mitzvahs is all about us, all about how it's going to refine us. So, for example, when it comes to ritual slaughter, if we slaughter by the neck and not the back, it refines us. It makes us more, we have more of a heart and emotion and feelings to slaughter in the most humane way. It gives us an element of humanity. And this aspect of mitzvahs cover every single piece of our reality. Let's read over here. Here's a lengthier example. God did not leave anything in the world without providing the people of Israel with means of performing a mitzvah with it. A person proceeding to plow, must he do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Similarly, if one wishes to sow, do not sow kilayim, hybrid planting in your vineyard. Reap when you reap your harvest in your field, leaving any forgotten sheaves for the poor. Thresh, do not muzzle an ox while it is threshing. Knead the dough. From your first of your kneading bowl, separate some challah, remove eggs from a nest, send away the mother bird, slaughter wild animal or fowl, cover its blood with soil, plant a tree, observe its orla by obtaining the first few years. So again, on and on, there is dictates of how to live our life in so many areas of our life. Why? If it was just about the first aspect, we could be doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? We could chop wood all day. God could say, I want you to get up in the morning, go out and chop wood, come back in the evening, go to sleep. Get up the next morning, go chop wood, come back in the next evening. But God wants to reach all the elements of our life. God wants to elevate all the parts of our life by pointing out how the positive qualities of everything in this world are there to express God's goodness and perfection. So to put it another way, the first aspect of the mitzvah is abnegation, overcoming our feeling of self-sufficiency. The second function of every mitzvah is to bring forth the positive qualities of the physical reality of ourselves and the world around us. And that is why the details in the second mitzvahs makes a big difference. So let me pull up on the screen over here. So again, we have two parts of every mitzvah. A is that it's a general fulfillment of God's will. And B, it's a specific spiritual refinement. Function A, it penetrates the concealment of our feeling of self-sufficiency. And the B type of mitzvah is how every mitzvah engages a different part of ourself. Here it's engaging our arm, here it's helping another person, here it's dipping apple in honey, I guess. Giving charity, all of these things affect us in a different way. And again, here you have it again, a third way of looking at it. In a general way, every mitzvah action counteracts the inherently selfish self-perception of physical reality and reinforces that truth that it exists only to serve a higher purpose. And in a specific way, each mitzvah makes a particular part of the world more spiritually refined, more generous, more aware, more respectful, more loving, and more connected. Any questions? So again, to recap, we started with this idea that our job in this world is to make this world a home for God. Now, to make God a home in this lowly world. We described what is lowly world, a world in which there is a lack of awareness of God. And we explained deeper today, what does awareness mean? We gave the example of the piano. We said just as a piano can exist in many different worlds, but only one world really gets that it's a piano. A woodpecker sees it as a piece of wood, and other people might see it as a table. Similarly, our job is to bring the full awareness that everything in this world is to sing God, so to speak, to play God. And how do we do that? We do this through the mitzvot. And today we explained that it happens on two levels. One level it happens on is just by the fact that we're using an object and listening to God with it. That's basically saying that everything in this world exists only to serve God, regardless of what we're doing with it. And then in a specific way, the commandments also give us specific ways to elevate ourselves. Kosher, just on a general scale, can help us be more aware of how we eat and eat with more purpose. Of course, kosher can affect you on many different levels. It also has spiritual effects, spiritual benefits. Prayer also has meditation, keeping Shabbat. All of these mitzvahs, we can look at the benefits, and that's fine because this is all in the realm of number 2. It doesn't take away from number 1. Both of these are true. How it elevates the different parts of our lives and brings out the inherent goodness of God within it and within us. But now we have to ask a question, which is a question that we asked in the previous question we answered, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But if our goal is to bring an awareness of God in the entire world, how are we going to reach the whole world? There's only 18 million Jews, and there's only so many commandments, and there's only so many people keeping those commandments. How are we going to bring mitzvahs? If mitzvahs are the way to elevate the entire world, how are we going to reach the whole world? And to answer that, last time we brought the example of the pencil. They have a long video over here, but I don't think the video is necessary. It's based on somebody wrote an article. Somebody wrote a lengthy article, basically describing that a pencil, a simple pencil, how much work goes into making a pencil. What I prefer is there's actually a YouTube series if you want to watch it up. There's a guy called Andy George. There's a guy called Andy George from Minnesota. He in 2015, he decided he's going to make a sandwich. Right? Everybody here has made a sandwich before in their life. Yeah. At least I'm past ready to make a Korach sandwich. So I want to make a sandwich. But he said, I want to do every single aspect of the sandwich. So it took him 6 months. He went to go plant the wheat, plant the cucumbers to make pickles. He went to go grow the chickens and then slaughter them and skin them. And then he went to make cheese. Okay, he's not Jewish. He went to make cheese. So he had to go milk the cow and then turn it into cheese. And then he went to go to the ocean to get some salt. And grew all the vegetables, and it made mayonnaise also. Mayonnaise is complicated too. It's not just the oil. So he had to make the oil for the mayonnaise, and you have to get the eggs, of course. You have to put in the spices in the mayonnaise. You have to grow that. It took him 6 months. And the final videos, of course, of him eating the sandwich 6 months later, and they're like, how is it? He's like, it's okay. It's okay. It's not bad. I would have told him, make a bracha before, and then it's amazing. You elevate 6 months, you elevated 6 months, but instead he's like, for 6 months, this is what I get. But I think his real idea was to make money, showing how long it takes to make a sandwich and YouTube ads. But either way, my point is that every single item we do a mitzvah with, let's say you take a sandwich and you eat it. Now you can see all that history behind that sandwich, how much it took to make that sandwich. When you eat the sandwich, you're not just elevating yourself and the sandwich, you're elevating all those that came before you to help make that sandwich happen. We're studying a JLI class today. The people behind Zoom and the people behind the PowerPoint and the people behind the camera that I use and the people behind the microphone and the people behind the textbook and all the actions that went into that, we are elevating all of those aspects of the world at this moment in time. And so every mitzvah has an exponential power, and so therefore it's easily and readily understood how mitzvot can actually reach the entire world. So now let's go back to the original question we had in the class. The original question we had in the class, we wanted to know, why do we do mitzvot? We gave lots of options, and so actually we can say that all of them are true. All of them are true to an extent. Right? It's true because God said so. That's point number 1. And then here you have all point number 2 of a mitzvah. It makes my life more orderly and stable. It makes my life more spiritual. It strengthens my Jewish identity. It feels right. It makes the world a better place. I believe that God will reward me. I'm afraid to disobey God. All of these are true. All of these reasons why we do a mitzvah are true. But there's one overreaching purpose of all of these. If you recall, these are the 2 ways that mitzvot bring awareness of God into the world. And so really there's one overreaching reason we do mitzvot. And what is that? To bring awareness of God in the world, right? One way of bringing God in the world is just by listening to God. The other way of bringing awareness of God in the world is by focusing on the inherent goodness and all the different elements of this world, which is godly goodness, right? And all of this, the overreaching goal of all of this, is to bring an awareness of God into the world, which will culminate with the coming of the Moshiach. The coming of the Moshiach is when the awareness of God in the world is complete. And so a more overreaching answer to say, why do we do mitzvahs? We can actually say is to bring Moshiach. Why? What is Moshiach? Moshiach is awareness of God in the world. How do we accomplish that? Through the mitzvot. How do mitzvahs accomplish that? Through these many reasons. But all of these reasons are really just a way to bring an awareness of God in the world. And so when I say, why do you do a mitzvah? You can say, because it feels right. It makes me a better person. You can say that because I should be listening to God. You can say that, and that's true. It is true. But the overreaching goal behind that is because it's bringing the Mashiach. That's the whole goal behind it. Remember we said in last class that God in the beginning, he thought of Mashiach. That was his ultimate goal, the Spirit of God hovering over the water, God's hovercraft, whatever it was. The ultimate goal of God was to bring the Mashiach. Okay, so now at this point, you should have a better understanding of what is the soul of the Mashiach. The soul of Mashiach, in other words, the inner, the more spiritual aspect of Mashiach, is the awareness of the reality that God is really the reality of the world. Like a piano, like the piano analogy, we have to have the awareness that there's a piano, that it's a piano, it plays music, but be an awareness that all this world here is to scream out God. How do we accomplish that? Through mitzvot. How do mitzvot do this? Through these two ways, either by accepting that God is the true reality and the boss of the world, or B, the details of the mitzvah will help express the goodness of God embodied in us and in the world. But you may ask, all right, Rabbi, so you explained to me why I do a mitzvah. It's all for Mashiach and everything expresses Mashiach. But why do I care, Rabbi? Let me just do the mitzvah. I have my reasons why I do it. Why do I need to know the overreaching goal is awareness of God and elevating the world and bringing to the world into the utopian spiritual era when God will be revealed on the earth? Just let me do the good deeds for whatever reason I want to do it. And when Mashiach comes, he'll come. Why do I have to have this focus? Now, we know that you do have to have this focus. I'll just bring you a couple texts that we do have to think about Mashiach every moment. Here's a couple texts. If you go to text number 10. I'm way behind over here. Oh, because I went backwards. That's why. Text number 10. We had, right, the 12th foundational Jewish belief is the era of Mashiach. That is to believe and to affirm that he will come and not to think that he will be delayed. Let's read here from Maimonides. Also, anyone who does not believe in Mashiach or does not expectantly await his coming denies not only other prophets, but the Torah of our teacher Moses. So not only do we have to believe in Mashiach, we have to expectantly await him. And here, I believe with a complete faith in the coming of Mashiach, although he may tarry, I expectantly await his coming every day. So it's not enough to believe Mashiach's coming. We have to expect, and we have to work towards that goal. And so let's read over here a response to that. A Jew can argue, practically, what is it important for me to know that the redemption will arrive someday? I need to do my work and fulfill that which God instructs me to do. It's not my business to know or to be concerned with the greater objectives and the results of my service. Right? What's a big deal? So I'm doing a mitzvah for this reason, doing a mitzvah for that reason, and they're true. Why do I need to know the overreaching goal? The fallacy of this approach should be self-understood. But here's an illustration. Imagine a soldier in the midst of a battle standing up and saying, it's not my business to know why my commanding officer gave me an order to fire my weapon. All that's important is that I meticulously follow the order handed down by the chain of command. The fact that my actions impact the outcome of the battle, causing the enemy to retreat and bring my side closer to victory, is irrelevant to me. I just need to shoot my rifle. This soldier, even if he dutifully executes every order he is given, will lack morale and passion. Moreover, without a doubt, to one degree or another, it will negatively impact his performance on the battlefield. The same is true regarding our service of God through Torah mitzvot observance. We cannot claim that it is not our concern whether or not our services affect the long-awaited victory. We must know that there is a campaign underway and that it is our mission to bring it to its successful conclusion. We must be keenly aware of the reality that with each additional mitzvah, we reveal more godliness in the world, thereby moving a step closer to the ultimate triumph. And so the idea is that we are in a campaign. We're not just disparate people doing good things that make us better people. There's a campaign going on by God. God has a campaign. And when we identify with that campaign, we'll become crazed to win it, right? So if the soldier just, all right, let me shoot. So you do your job and you're done. But if you bought into the campaign, like an American soldier, we're fighting for the freedom of the world. We're fighting the Nazis. We're fighting whoever it is. If you bought into the idea, you are much more invested and involved, and you'll do things with much more alacrity. You'll be running to do it because it's not just Am I going to get a gold medal? Am I going to, you're invested in what's going on. And so that's the idea here. It's not enough just to do a mitzvah to say, well, it's good because it makes me a better person, makes the world a better place in general. All the different reasons that we have, develop and nurture a relationship with God. Those are all important. But I think we'll be moving at a turtle's pace if that's all we think about. If we're just thinking about those items, we may slow down. So I'll do it right. What makes us run, what makes us try to get as much as we can get done is the recognition that there's a campaign being waged over here. We're trying to bring the world to the ultimate perfection. I'm part of that. I will do anything I can to try and bring that to happen in my days. And we can look at it in another sense. Here we gave an example of a soldier, but let's give it another description. Let's take an example of an employee and an employer, right? An employee is focused on getting his job done. An employee may generally care about the company so that they can get their paycheck at the end, but they don't really care. They're not invested, right? The employee leaves at 7, they clock out, and they're done with their day. But an employer, he's focused on the company and the mission statement. He is fully invested in it. And actually, that is what we're told. We are told that we are not just people that are watching what's going on, but we are actually fully invested into what God is asking of us. How so? Because we are not just workers for God, we are actually partners with God. Let's read over here. The Torah, text number 7 from the Talmud. The Torah considers those who recite the passage of Vayechulu. That's the passage in which we talk about, we read the 6th day of creation, and then the 7th day in the Marav service on Shabbat. We read the paragraph where it describes how God rested on the 7th day. The Torah considers those who recite the passage of Vayechulu during the eve of Shabbat prayers as if they have become partners with God in the work of creation. Again, so we can become partners with God within the work of creation. And what does it mean? What does it mean? When the Talmud is just throwing out a statement, we're partners with God in the work of creation. What it's saying is when I rest on Shabbat, and I read that paragraph saying I'm resting on Shabbat, what that means is I've come to a recognition that God has created this world, and he's created it with a purpose. That's why I'm stopping on Shabbat. And so when I stop on Shabbat, it elevates my entire week. And what it's saying is there's a recognition of my entire week. Everything is serving God. And as such, I become a partner with God. And this is why our sages say something very strange in the ethics of our fathers. They say like this: Antigonus of Socho received the tradition from Antigonus of Socho received the tradition from Shimon the righteous. He would say, "Do not be as servants who serve their master for the sake of reward. Rather be as servants who serve their master not for the sake of reward." So again, he said, don't serve God for the sake of reward, but be as servants who serve their master not for the sake of reward. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to serve God not for the sake of reward? What that means is I'm not doing it because I'm going to get rewarded. I'm doing it because I bought into the mission of what God wants. I'm a partner. And as a partner, I assume ownership of it. And when I assume ownership, I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do it in a much better way. Let's take a look over here at the screen. Oh, the screen is already up there. Okay, so why do we do a mitzvah? In order to bring Moshiach. What's so important to know that? It's because we are partners with God in the work of creation. And here we have the employee versus the employer analogy. The employee thinks about reward. The partner thinks about the result. I don't know if we need those. Okay, all right. So to conclude the section, I'm going to summarize to you what we've said so far. We have only one more section. Don't worry if your heads are spinning. We have only one more section. So to conclude this section, we have now concluded that why is it important to know why we do what we do, and why is it important to know the ultimate goal of what we do. No, it's not just the base level meaning of mitzvahs, but that's to bring the Moshiach, because it will greatly enhance and speed up what we do, trying to accomplish this. And this brings us to the final point, which is, can we truly expect the Moshiach to come today? So I've described so far in this class that the point of mitzvos is to bring awareness of God within this world. It does that in two different ways. And when we appreciate that, we appreciate that that's what mitzvahs do, and that awareness of God is ultimately the goal of Moshiach. Moshiach is the culmination of that awareness of God within this world. Can we truly expect that our mitzvahs have accomplished that so far? You know, in the first class, we showed how the world is physically a better place. There's less hunger, less poverty, more healing in the world, more peace in the world. But is the world a spiritually better place? And is there a good reason to hope that Mashiach can come today? You know, I pointed out to Maimonides, so we have to await his coming every day. Is that just a dream? Is that just a hope? Is that just a nice thought? Mashiach can come today? All right, we all believe Mashiach will come, but who said he's going to come today? Right? Now, you could say, obviously, well, if God promises, that means Mashiach's going to come, but that only means he's going to come someday. But how do we know Mashiach could come today? How is that a possible reality? And in fact, Moshiach himself one time said this. You have in text number 11, I'm not going to read it, but in text number 11, it says there was a Talmudic sage. He asked Elijah, where is Moshiach? And he went to find Moshiach. And he went to Moshiach. He said, when are you coming? It's time already. This is close to 2,000 years ago. He said, Moshiach, when are you coming? You were promised about me. When are you coming? Moshiach thought, I'm coming today. So the great sage Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, amazing, Mashiach's coming today. He was so excited. He was so happy. The day came, the day went. Mashiach did not reveal himself that day. And he came back the next day and he said, he came to Elijah. He said, Mashiach, type of Mashiach. We have a Mashiach who's a liar. Mashiach who's a liar. He's lying to me. He told me he's coming today. Where is he? And so Elijah told him, what he meant is, Hayom today in Bekolo Tishmaon. If you listen to God. He's ready to come today, but if you listen to God today. And so, what does that mean? So it's really not that hard to bring Mashiach. All we have to do is just listen to him one day and then he's ready to come, right? What does that even mean? And so the answer is that this really goes to the heart of what we discussed today. If we appreciate what we discussed in the beginning of the class with the piano, then we have our answer. How is it possible for us to truly expect that Mashiach can come today? If the idea is to transform the world from something it is not, then that is a very difficult task, and that can take a very long time. In other words, if our goal in this world is to take something that's inherently not godly and to make it godly, that might take forever. That might take a very, very long time. But if, as we've said today, that the reality of the world is godly, the reality of the world is the piano, we might be experiencing the world now as a piece of wood, but in order for us to experience it as a piano, we don't need to change anything. We just need to change our outlook. We just need to change how we look at things. The inner truth of the world is already there. The surface reality of the world is what's flawed. The surface reality of the world is imperfect. And once we understand that the inner truth is far more real than the outer truth, then Mashiach is no longer a utopian dream. It becomes perfectly realistic to expect that Mashiach can come today. Because all that has to happen is one person has to come there and say, it's not wood, it's a piano. Let me show you. Let's take a look at this text from the Rabbi. Very powerful over here. Let's take a look. Okay. Oh, I have to share with you. Sorry. Share with you the screen. So the Rebbe, if you know, was very crazy about Mashiach, let's say. He would talk about Mashiach incessantly, especially in the later years. And so the Rebbe one time got down and talking to me, who says, you must be looking at me like I'm crazy. So here, this is what the Rebbe says. We have been discussing the redemption and the era of Mashiach. Some in the audience are genuinely astounded at this, although for obvious reasons, they do not voice their amazement. It's going to challenge the Rebbe, right? How can an individual appear in public week after week and repeatedly and unceasingly discuss a single subject, the coming of the Mashiach? Moreover, this individual emphasizes, he's referring to himself, the Rebbe, that he is not merely discussing the published Torah materials on the topic. Rather, he is discussing our righteous Mashiach's actual coming in our tangible reality here on the physical earth. And immediately, on this very day, Shabbat Parshat Pinchas 5744, This individual further instructs others to sing on each and every occasion, may the Holy Temple be rebuilt speedily in our days. And he points out that speedily in our days does not refer to the very near future. It means quite literally speedily today. Certainly, every Jew believes that Moshiach can come at any moment, in keeping with one of the fundamentals of the Jewish faith that states, I await his coming every day. Nevertheless, they wonder, how is it justifiable to discuss this topic without let-up, and to emphasize on each occasion that Moshiach can come at every moment? Is it not rather challenging to expect people to relate to Moshiach's imminence as if it were a tangible fact of our reality? So why does this individual speak incessantly about this on every occasion and with such single-minded intensity as if to forcefully ram the idea in the minds of his listeners? It's a good question. Their conclusion is, meaning the people, is that all of this is a beautiful dream. As we recite in our prayers, may all my dreams be positively fulfilled for me and for all of Israel. Nice, but not realistic. If so, they claim there's no point in discussing one's dreams at such length and with such frequency. That's how we all feel. The Moshiach, we could discuss it all day, all night. It's a nice dream. It'll happen one day. Who's really expecting Moshiach to come today? It's a good dream, right? The truth, however, is precisely the opposite. Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi delivered a discourse based on the verse, when God returns the exiles of Israel, we shall be as those who have dreamed. Thus, when we return from exile, we will be like people who are dreaming. He explained that our current state of exile is comparable to a dream. Because in a dream, one's sense of perception can tolerate the most contradictory and irrational things. In other words, our current reality is a dream, whereas the world of Moshiach is our true reality. In a single moment, the situation can be reversed from one extreme to the other. We can awaken from the dream of exile and enter the true reality, the actual state of redemption. If so, each and every individual present in this room certainly has the ability to make redemption come immediately. Not tomorrow in the near future, but right now. On this Shabbat, Parshat Pinchas, before we even have a chance to recite afternoon prayers. Simply stated, at this very moment, we open our eyes and see Mashiach in the flesh with here of us in this room. And so what he's saying is, we think the idea of Mashiach is a dream. We're the ones that are dreaming. We're the ones that are living in a dream-like state. We're not recognizing the piano as a piano. And all we need is someone to walk in there and say a piano is a piano. We are oblivious to the reality around us. It's just a piece of information. You know, we think, oh, there's so much we have to do, so much we need to do. It's ultimately really just a piece of information. It's like when we presented the first class, how so many people have a negative view of what's going on in the world. And when in reality, it's not. And all they need is the right pieces of information to know that the world is a much, much better place than it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And so the Rabbi says the same thing is over here. Is that Mashiach is not some dream that can come and may come. Mashiach is a dream that is very easily attainable. And so all we each need to do is each of us should do our part. And we're really not that far from the goal. And so you ask how much spirituality is in the world. It's obviously, we're almost there. We're almost there. The amount of awareness of God in the world today is at a very high level. You could claim and look at the atheists. I'm not going to get into, how many atheists are really atheists. And ultimately the way, the state of the world, awareness and appreciation for the goodness of the world is at all-time high. Maybe the way to accomplish it, we might not agree with all of the ways that it's being done, but we are in a dreamlike state. And that's really the reality. The real reality of the world, and that's really the idea today that I want to bring out to you. The real reality of the world is goodness, kindness, God. God is the reality of the world. We just have to have a recognition of that. And that's really the powerful lesson that I want each and every single one of us to walk away with today. We went into, the reason why we do mitzvahs, and we do the mitzvahs because it brings an awareness of God into the world. But it all starts with one seminal point. And that seminal point is, what is the real reality of the world? Ask yourself, what is the real reality of the world today? The real reality of the world, the inner true reality of the world is not that there's a bad world I have to transform to good. The real reality is it's good. I just have to show that it's good. It's like when you take a child, every child is naturally good. You have to just reveal their inherent goodness. And when we do that, I think it is not just a liberating thought, it is such an inspirational thought. It helps us go on in our lives. We have challenges in our lives that prevent us from doing mitzvahs so many times. We don't want to do a mitzvah for this reason, that reason. We're embarrassed. We're let's say you're in an airport. It's getting late. You want to put on tefillin. You're embarrassed. Everybody around you is doesn't know what tefillin is. You'll put it on. They'll think you're a high security risk. How can I wear the tefillin? But when you recognize the reality of the airport is godliness and just express godliness, then I'm the reality. They're the dreamers. I'm the reality of the world. When you take off from work on a random Wednesday for Yom Kippur, whatever it is, whatever mitzvah that you're doing, and you feel out of place, just remember, you are part of the reality. You're not the outlier. You are the reality. And you're revealing the reality. Everybody else is a woodpecker. Or maybe even better, they're people that don't know music. You know the music. You can express them the music. And you know what happens when you do that? People respect you and people come over to you. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, what is this? Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, that's what it means. All right, the boss at work might not like you taking so many days off of work. Okay, all right, there's a couple people out there still haven't gotten the memo. But and so again, what I'm trying to say is this is not just a good idea, but it's an inspirational idea. So what we have to walk away with today, there were a lot of ideas, a lot of ideas. One was this idea that every mitzvah, in reality, there's no greater mitzvah than another. At the same time, every mitzvah can elevate us in a very specific way. We had the idea that these two methods of mitzvahs bring an awareness of God within the world, which is ultimately will happen when Moshiach comes. And we are not far from that messianic age because all it is an awareness. All it is an awareness. And if we can change our mindset to buy into this, buy into God's vision, but most importantly, recognize the reality of the world around us, I think we'd all be doing a better job of what we're doing. And so that's what we need to constantly study. And I always like to say, study not just the revealed parts of Torah, but the Hasidic philosophy, the intersection of Torah, because the intersection of Torah will always help you recognize this inner reality and dimension. When we have these types of discussion, the meaning behind the world, the meaning of mitzvahs, these are the discussions that bring you into the real reality of the world. Because when we discuss the technicality of a mitzvah, you're stuck in the physical action. How do you put on tefillin? How do you light Shabbat candles? How do you bake challah? When we discuss the soul of things, then we're discussing the reality of the world as it is. And it helps us appreciate that there's a reality beyond our shallow perception. And that's really what we have to get to, a point where we can recognize how there's a deeper reality to everything in this world beyond our shallow perception. And that's where the studying of Hasidic philosophy comes in. And so I've been spinning your heads the last 2 weeks because we've been discussing some Hasidic philosophy. And hopefully it's helped you appreciate that idea that there's more to this world than the eye sees. And there's a lot more that can be done. And so may we all recognize the reality of this world for what it is. Let's call it piano. Let's call this world godly. It is a godly world. We're not transforming bad into good. We are revealing what is already good, and we're letting everybody else know about it. Thank you so much. That is the end of today's class. And now I will stop the recording and